Hello, Steve White, Trekway 89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, I just watched the first episode of Season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Now, there are some overall issues with the series, and instead of trying to go through these in the episode review, I did a separate video of that. And I'm just going to focus on the episode itself. I'll touch on those other issues when they become relevant. But this episode was okay. It wasn't great. It was a surprise because I assumed the first episode of the season was going to be dealing with Una's legal problems and getting her back back onto the ship. Because often these shows set up some big cliffhanger just for the sake of the end of the season. Then the first episode of the season they fix it and everything's back to normal so the series can continue on. So at least we have to give them some respect for having some integrity, where this is apparently going to drag out for a few episodes. Hopefully not too long, though, because we do want to get Una back sooner than later. So the start of the episode shows Una talking to Pike, and she is having trouble getting counsel, because apparently, the Federation is no better in the future than we are today with representing people, particularly minorities. So that's, again, a way that they sort of undermine Gene's, vision of the future in Starfleet as being a utopian society and a fair sort of, Federation. So Pike basically says, well, look, I will go there in person and speak to this lawyer myself, even if it takes 3 days in a shuttle. So he does that. So he leaves the Enterprise in Space Dock. Now, Space Dock, it's a lot of detail and it's well shot in some ways, but it's basically dirty and cluttered and grey and metal and doesn't really look like Star Trek. So it's very much Star Wars, very much trying to appeal to that modern aesthetic that people who have no imagination, who can't envision the future as being better or different than today, so everything has to look like our technology. It's sort of good, it starts off good, and it's one of those good and bad sort of things where they've got the detail and the effects technology is there, but it's not quite right. So they leave the Enterprise in Space Dock. He leaves for 3 days, he leaves Spock in command. And when the techies come in to do the repairs and everything, there's a guy who he wants to shut down communications so he can do some repairs. And Uhura's like, no, let me set up a secondary thing. And he basically mansplains to her, or basically is condescending, like, why do you need to do this? How important are the calls, sort of thing, that your messages you're waiting on. She knows better, of course, and unfortunately she feels the need to put him in his place, as a man, and the women sort of all do that on the bridge, and it's this really uncomfortable thing that didn't exist in Star Trek. There was no battle of the sexes. There was no men mansplaining to women and trying to reassert their power because, women are now equal. Women and men were just equal. There was none of this. So this is a very Discovery thing, which is just doesn't need to be there. There would be no issue. This is sort of tension between the sexes and levels of command and all that they put into the show because I think they need that to create drama. It's not a Star Trek thing. So, of course, she's right, and they get a message from Lan, who is on another planet. Basically, she went to return Newt because, as we know, they basically ripped off aliens last season. And when she's on the Klingon planet, this planet, a mining planet where her parents are, they discover that the Klingons, they want to restart the war because they profited so well from it, this mining colony, that they have somehow found a Federation ship that they've got hidden in the mine, and they're going to use that to set up the Federation and act as though they have invaded their space, because this planet apparently is governed by the Federation 1 month and the Klingons the next month, and that's why when Spock goes to... because Uhura takes the message to Spock and Spock takes it to April, and April says no, basically because it's not their month to govern the planet, and he's like, we're going to have to wait till next month because we're not sure it is actually her and there's really a problem, and 2, because we just don't want to, rock the boat, which is a very un-Federation thing, to just abandon a citizen and leave them to fend for themselves. So, and then of course we have the issue of April being race swapped, because if you know the original show, the character was white. Now you're supposed to believe in canon that this character decided he identified as black and used medical technology to change his race to black, which makes no sense. And when you're watching the show, it just is ridiculous. Like, how did this white character become black? Why couldn't they just create a new black character, have him be the admiral, rule the roost, and be in charge? That's fine. I have no issues with black people being in control and being in charge and being in positions of power. But when the character was originally white, it just, like you're trying to watch it and you're like, you can't forget these things when you know that the character was white. Now they got rid of the Asian character who had, because there was a white transporter engineer who they race swapped Commander Kyle to be Asian. So apparently there's people are changing their race all the time in Star Trek. So apparently he identified as a young Asian man and changed himself from a middle-aged white guy into a young Asian man. He wasn't there this episode. They had another transporter chief who looked about 12, and that was strange as well. So there's a whole bunch of weirdness happening in this show. But no, I don't have any problem with Asian characters or with Asian people being on the show, in the crew, in command, anything like that. It's just when you've already established a character's white and you change them and you know the character's white, you can't view it and not go, but yeah, people who don't know, who don't watch the original series won't care, so they don't care about us. Okay, so trying not to get into all those issues, but they keep coming up. So Spock, of course, now being this new emotional Spock, new emo Spock, basically says, okay, well, brings up the rest of the crew and says, yeah, we got a call from Lan, she's in trouble, but Starfleet doesn't care, so we're just going to steal the Enterprise. And they're all like, okay. So they do it. Now they fake a warp core breach to get everyone off the ship so they can steal it. But one of the engineers, who's played by Carol Kane, who's just amazing in creating this absolutely quirky, unique character, and not in a lame Neelix sort of way, but in just a really interesting sort of way. She's this ancient character whose their races lived on Earth for thousands of years, I think, and they weren't really discovered for a long time. They're practically eternal. They live so long. But yeah, she's apparently getting a bit bored teaching, and she's like, okay, I found what you guys did. I can see that you basically faked a warp core breach to steal the Enterprise. You must have really good reasons. Oh, count me in. So she jumps on, and she actually advises them to release, I think, the coolant from the warp nacelles. And then the space station says, can you distance yourself from us, please? It looks like there's a problem. And they release the docking clamps, and then they just speed on off to Kajar 4, I think it was called. And that's where they find Lan. She explains everything. And Mbenga and Chapel end up on the Federation ship, and to try and get a signal out letting them know that there's actually a ship. Because I don't think Lan knew how they were going to do it, just that they were planning to do it. And they were planning to do it through this captured Federation ship. So they take this special drug to make them basically superheroes so they can fight the Klingons hand to hand. They do that, they end up trapped in an airlock with no spacesuits, and they shoot themselves out with a beacon, hoping that they will be beamed up in time to be revived. So they do that. Spock, who's already there, of course, realizes that they have to destroy this ship to stop the Klingons using it and to save, the Federation from another war. But in order to do that, he has to sacrifice Christine, who he knows is on the ship. He delays a little bit, but he does it. It's very difficult for him, we can see visually. And they do have the joke about him picking his thing to say on the bridge, and it seems to be now. Like, I want to go now. So it seems to be his thing will be like, go to warp now or something. I don't know. He had to have a thing. So yeah, they blow up the ship, and fortunately, of course, they find the transponder, they beam them on. He actually has to resuscitate her in the transporter room before the medical crew arrives. But Mbenga survives, she survives, they get out alive. The Klingons kind of call them on what they did, but they kind of respect them for it, and they invite Spock down for a glass of blood wine, and Spock holds his own, but he's very affected by it, and he has a little drink with Carol Kane, and she's basically like, the worst part about living forever? And Spock is like, seeing everyone die, all the people you love pass, and she's like, well, you're very non-Vulcan, that's kind of yes, but no, it's the boredom. I need to have some fun, let's go. So she's fabulous, I love her. The effects were beautiful. Like I said, the space dock looked more like Star Wars, but once they got out into space, into this asteroid field of red crystal and everything, showing the two Federation ships fight through that looked amazing, and the ship looked great. And when it's in those sort of environments where it's lit really well, it almost looks like the Enterprise. But when it's in space, it just looks dark and grey and reflective, and part of the reason why the ships were painted light colours and matte colours was so they would absorb the light and, you know, not sort of be like metallic and reflective and so forth and so on. There's lots of little issues with the show, but overall the episode was good, the characters are good, the acting were good. The only real issue I had was with Mbenga sort of throwing out Starfleet protocol and basically essentially committing war crimes and sort of torturing a prisoner essentially almost with the Klingon, or at least they called him on that, and he just was like, I don't care. It's like, this is what I've learned from my past, and I'm just gonna, I don't care. And I'm just like, that's just not very Starfleet. And yeah, they did kind of deal with Nurse Chapel and the potential leave she takes later and changing career and everything, but they wanted to create a kick-ass female character with Chapel, and they did, but it's not really Nurse Chapel. So if you look at her as just her own character, she's great, but if you look at her as Chapel, it doesn't work. So yeah, like I said, depends on how you view this show, whether it works. But overall, it was okay. I'm going to go.